Well, what are these numbers? Okay, so to understand, we're going to look at a number line. If you've ever used a number line before, I'm sure you know that it goes from a smaller number to a bigger number. So in all these numbers over here, the leftmost number is the smallest number, and the rightmost number is the largest number. Okay, that was a lot of numbers. So if we look on the right side over here, these look like numbers we use all the time in math class. What's so special about them? Well, these numbers are actually positive numbers, and we know they're positive because they're greater than zero. And we know they're greater than zero because they come on its right side in the number line. Now, if you look over on the left side, you can kind of see that it looks like the opposite of the numbers on the right side. So you can think of these negative numbers on the left here as opposites of the positive numbers here. We know that these are negative numbers because they're numbers that are less than zero, and also they have a little minus sign in front of them. Well, you might be wondering, how come positive numbers don't have a sign in front of them? Well, that's because these positive numbers do actually have a plus sign. We just don't write it down all the time because we know if there's no sign, it's still positive. We just haven't written down the plus sign. So you can kind of think of it like the plus sign is invisible sometimes. Okay, now since the number line goes from the smallest number on the left to the largest number on the right, when it comes to negative numbers only, the numbers that are larger, like 7, -7, -10, -11, those are actually smaller than the numbers like -1, -2, and -3. Well, that makes no sense. That's because on the number line it goes from smaller to larger. So since -1 comes over here, it's going to be larger than something more left than -1, which -5, -4, -3. So when you remember that negatives are opposites from positive, also remember that when you're thinking of how big and small they are, you also think of it in an opposite way from how you would think of a positive number. Okay, so here are some notes you can write down, and we're just going to read everything we just learned. Numbers that are less than zero are negative numbers. You find them with a negative sign or a minus sign in front of them, and you see this negative sign when you subtract something like 4 minus 2. Numbers that are more than zero are called positive numbers. You also see a positive sign when you are adding numbers like 3 plus 1. The plus is the positive sign. The plus sign is in front of all positive numbers, but we don't draw it on all the time because we know that all numbers that don't have any sign in front of them are positive. Now you might be wondering, well, what about 0? Is 0 positive or negative? Why don't you take a guess? Well, 0 is actually not positive or negative, sort of like just there. Okay, now I want you to pause the video and try to answer just 3 questions, and let's see how much you learned, okay? Okay, I guess you're back. So, out of these, which ones are negative numbers? Well, if we look here, there's a minus sign here, here, and also here. So therefore, -1, -2, and -6 are all negative numbers. What about the positive numbers? Well, we know that we don't need a sign, a plus sign in front of positive numbers. It's kind of invisible sometimes. So 5, 9, and 4 are all positive numbers. Well, what about 0? Why didn't we answer that one? That's because 0 is neither positive nor negative. Okay, now this third question is a little tricky, so I want you to picture the number line and try to answer which one is larger, -5 or -3. The answer is -3. So if we go back to our number line here, -3 is more on the right compared to -5, which is more on the left in the number line. And since the number line gets greater as it goes from left to right, we know that -3 is going to be bigger than -5. Let's look at an example to understand better. Okay, so if you live somewhere that snows, and if you don't, well, I hope you see snow someday. Well, if you live somewhere that snows, you might have heard your parents talk about, oh, it's so cold today. It's negative something something degrees. That, and whenever it's negative anything degrees, then it starts to snow. This is because negative degrees means that it's below zero, and below zero means that the temperature is actually freezing, which is what we're talking about when we talk about degrees. So if you look at this thermometer over here, you can actually have negative numbers and negative degrees. So the negative degrees tells how cold something is and how much we're losing warmth, right? So if we have -3 degrees, we know that's going to be warmer than -10 degrees, which is going to be colder. So that kind of explains how the number line works. -10 degrees, which is more on the left side of the number line, is going to be less warm than -3 degrees, which is more on the right side of the number line. Okay, everyone, I hope you learned something today, and if the video got a little confusing at any point, feel free to rewind, ask questions, and have a good day, guys.